So, as Linda was saying, my name is Janet Rodriguez. I use she and her pronouns. I am a cisgender, straight, racialized immigrant woman who lives with visible and invisible disabilities. I am a woman with brown skin, dark hair, brown eyes. I'm gonna say middle-aged-ish, and I'm wearing a green top and green earrings. The topic for today is my social justice includes disability justice. And I'm doing this as the volunteer work that I do with Disability Without Poverty, Le Handicap Sans Pauvreté. This is an organization that is national, bilingual, and it's grassroots, led by people with lived experience of disability. And we have been precisely pushing for the legislation that is supposed to lift people with disabilities out of poverty. It is also known as the CDB, Canada Disability Benefits. So for today's session, and in honor of accessibility, I'm going to encourage you to locate in the bottom of your screen an icon with 3 dots. When you click on it, it says CC. If you click on it, closed caption, you would be able to see the letters underneath your screen. So then you can see who is speaking. We also have 2 ASL interpreters. We have Tim right now on the screen, and they will be at certain number of minutes, they will be exchanging positions with Martin. And the reason we are doing this is because my social justice movement includes disability. There's many people whose language is ASL, American Sign Language, and it is a matter of equity to provide what we do in the most accessible possible way. So in terms of participation, at the end of my presentation, we're going to have time for question and answers, I hope. And I use something that is called share the air. So if you've said something, then maybe you can allow others to also give their opinion. That's how we learn, actually. Or if you said, I'm too shy, I don't want to be in camera, then you can pass. And also, I will encourage you to speak of your own experiences as much as you want to. This is not a confessional, but if there's something that you learn and is your experience, that little nugget is welcome. We want all of us to be aware of power imbalances. Just by the sheer fact that I'm here managing the conversation, I am in power, I am in control. However, I also want people to participate, and there's going to be some interactions. I'm going to be asking you to share your ideas through the chat. But if you cannot type for whatever reasons, you can ask to be unmuted, and we can hear your participation that way. Now, language. In the disability community world, there's this constant debate. Should I say a person with a disability, which is known as person first identity, or should I say a disabled person, which is identity first language? I personally use disabled person because the process of disablement is happening to me. Just as the process of racialization also happens to me. I didn't ask for it, but society puts barriers, and the barriers disabled me. So I am a disabled woman. And I will also use persons with disabilities, persons with lived experience of disability. And again, feel free to recommend something or suggest, because like I said at the beginning, we all are learning. Okay, last point, which is actually very important. If you need a drink, water, a break, you need to stand up, stretch, leave, please do. You know you, and you're the best person to gauge what is it that you need right now. So make sure that you are well taken care of. So we did have a land acknowledgement for those of us who were here at the beginning. But I also want to acknowledge that as an immigrant invited by the settler colonial state of Canada, I acknowledge my privilege to live, work, and learn in the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. Toronto is subject to the dish with one spoon, wampum belt covenant, and continues to be the home for many First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and urban indigenous peoples who are teaching us how to be better stewards of the land. So what's on for today? The teacher in me always wants to say, at the end of this session, what am I going to get out of? So we're going to compare and contrast concepts of impairment and disability, as well as the medical model and the social model, which are usually more, you can really see the contrast there. We're all going to identify barriers that perpetuate ableism and exclusion in their social justice work, or in our social justice work. We're going to integrate the principles of disability justice to help eliminate disability poverty. And also, we will choose short and long-term changes that you and your organization can do to be inclusive of disability. So this is the first time for you to participate. We have one poll that Elizabeth is going to send, and it's really just so you can see what is your level of engagement. I don't know you, you don't know me, but this is a way to start to get to know who is in the room. So do you volunteer? Are you a participant? Are you an organizer, or you do other things? So if you can please respond. We have 14% people have voted. Okay. I think we're good. All right, let's see the results. Oh, did I miss it?
Can you see the results?
Oh, no,
Maybe
I can't.
I need to share.
I can see the results.
Okay,
You
good.
can you please read them?
Sure. So for the first question, 35% of people said volunteer, 35% of people said participant, 18% said organizer, and 12% said other.
Fantastic.
2, disability justice. 0% said I've never heard of it. 50%, oh, it just vanished for me.
Yeah, that's the next one.
That's the next ball.
All right.
Thank you, Finn. So just for the ASL interpreters, I think we have one person, and I just want to make sure that if you can confirm that they can see you.
Riley speaking. So, hi, yes, I can see the interpreters. I just want to check, should I have my camera on or off? What is everybody else doing?
There's a combination of both, but if you want to speak, it will be ideal that you open your window when you speak. At the end, we'll have question and
Well, okay, I'll
answer.
keep it on. I want you all to see my smiling face. So, hi, Janet. Oh, it's good to see you. Hello. Much
Thank
love.
you.
Oh, and Elizabeth, I see you too. Hi, Elizabeth. Oh, really? I mean, it's amazing to see you, but I'm just wondering, does everyone else have their cameras off?
There's some people with cameras on. I encourage people to put their cameras on. It's always good.
Okay.
All right. So, so we just found out who is in the room. So using the chat, I would love to hear from you what city or territory you're joining from. Maybe you're very local, maybe you're a little bit far away. That would be lovely to know. You can always tell us if you're engaged in a social justice cause already, right? Maybe you organize for the environment, for health or education, all of them. And you can tell us if you see yourself as an individual, as how you look like, or your gender identity, your race. Do you see yourself reflected in the movement, whether it is for housing, anti-poverty, or whatever? I would love to see what's happening on the chat. And Elizabeth, if you want to help me read from the chat what people are saying, I would appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
I've got somebody saying they're from Toronto. Another person says, I'm shy, but challenging myself having my camera on. My preference would be to hide, but challenging myself today. Pickering, yes, with Raise the Rates and Seniors for Climate Action Now, Toronto.
Fantastic. Excellent. So as we go, I mean, you can continue sharing as much as you want. This is not a test. As I said, it's not a confessional. So this is something that I wanted to share with you. At the beginning, I said that I call myself a disabled person, not a person with a disability. We largely in society, in the government, in the legal world, we use the term disability as a noun. Like I can say, a bottle. This is my bottle. I have a bottle. But you never said, I have been bottled, right? So we use disability as a thing that we have that is impairing our bodies or our minds. When in fact, the way I see it is that I do have impairments in my body with mobility, with my mind. I live with chronic depression. But if I have all the accommodations, I have the time to participate, I have the energy, I can function. And usually the minute story that I share with people, it's a real life story. It's real, but not mine, my life. There's this blind lawyer in Toronto, and I have his permission to share this. So he is in a busy courtroom, ready to present his case, as he has done for many years. And suddenly they announce, sorry, today's court will be postponed. So he asked, what is the problem? And they say, well, the electricity went off. Nobody can see a thing. And he asks again, so what's the problem? Because everybody else in the room who could see, who was not having a vision impairment, was disabled by the fact that the electricity went out. So where is the disability? Right? It's not in this blind lawyer's body. It's in the environment, the context, what society puts in front of us. So what is disability and what is not? So the legal medical definition from the Ontario Human Rights Code says that disability is something that happens in the mind or the body of a person and renders it deficient. It can be a chronic condition, sensory, facial difference. A person can be born with it, can acquire it through life. These are definitions from the Accessible Canada Act as well. The Ontario Human Rights Code uses deficit in dehumanizing language to define disability. The World Health Organization has a most recent definition that I like. Disability is part of being human. And that is really, and this is just from 2022, it is really something that we need to be aware of. Some of us, disabled folk, for some of us, it is part of our identity. And we're proud to be a disabled person. And we're proud to be in the disability pride movement. And this is how we do things. And this is why we do the things we do. So I told you about the medical and social models. And this comes from the critical disability studies world, the world of academia, if you wish. But it actually started way back in the 50s and the 60s in the UK. There were a lot of people with disabilities that organized, and it started to challenge the medical model. The medical model was saying, disability is a problem. We need to cure it. We need to fix it. And it was usually the medical establishment through diagnosis, through therapies, that where the goal was to manage the condition or to relieve the person from suffering. And that way they could pat themselves in the back and say, yay, we've done a great job. It was a little bit of a charity model as well. The decisions are made by an expert, usually a physician. Imagine that back in the 50s, when a mother had a child with Down syndrome or other intellectual disabilities, the best advice, and I'm making air quotes, for that parent was to send their child to an institution and just say goodbye forever. That was the best medical advice. So the decisions are made by an expert, and the disabled person is seen as a broken, empty vessel, not capable of making their own decisions. There's been years of forced sterilization of Indigenous women, but also women with disabilities, because they were not considered capable of having a family, having children. They usually use deficit language, vision loss, hearing loss. The person is confined to a wheelchair, or the person suffers, you can fill in the blank, from diabetes, arthritis, whatever the disease. I live with arthritis. I don't suffer. I live with pain, but suffering is not part of my life. So what does the social model of disability tells us? The social model sees a disabled person as someone with agency that can make decisions about their own mind, their own body, their health, their illness process, in partnership with their specialist. The impairment is part of their identity, and some of us embrace that. And I think that we are now ready for poll number 2. So when I say the words disability justice, some of you may have heard it and know exactly what it means, and some of you may say, I have no idea. So feel free to answer whichever way it is. The polls are anonymous, so
When I touch the screen, nothing happens. How do I vote?
Elizabeth, I don't know. Oh, because I'm showing my screen. I think Elizabeth is going to launch the poll. I cannot hear you, sorry.
Elizabeth, you are still muted.
Okay, so I think you need to go down a little bit to poll number 2. There's 3 polls, just so you know. So let's answer poll number 2 only.
Yes, I've relaunched it and people are coming in now.
Excellent.
Thank you, Janet.
You're welcome.
Got 10 people, 11, 14. We are 24 people all told, so.
Let's give it a few seconds.
15, 16.
I still don't see where I can vote.
I don't know what your settings are, so I can't comment on how to help you because other folks are getting the automatic message, so I'm sorry about that.
It just popped up on my screen.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be a pop-up. Yeah. Okay, 18, 19 people.
It's just showing the poll number 2 disability justice page.
Yes. That is my screen.
Yeah, we're just seeing your screen. We're not seeing and now the yellow screen, but not.
Yes. And the bottom of your screen, usually there's a little square, like 4 little squares that says poll, and then you can launch that.
Okay.
But if not, feel free to put it in the chat as well. You can put option A or B or C. We will just add it.
Accessing the poll might be available where you access chat and record all those other features.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, so we can end the poll because this is just for our own to know where we are at.
Yes. So I'll read it. 0% say they have heard of it. 53% say I have an idea of what it is. 26% say I know exactly what it is. And 21% say it's the first time I hear this word.
Okay, well, thank you. Then we're going to have one more poll in a few slides. So does anybody feel that they can share maybe in a 30-second to share what is it that they know about disability justice? When those, especially those that say, I have an idea. You don't have to, but I would like to hear so I don't do all the talking. Anyone? Okay, Glenn, can you go ahead?
For me, it is the ability to say to somebody who is speaking too fast, for me with a hearing deficit, I'm sorry, but my hearing aids don't compensate for everything, and may I ask you to speak more slowly so that I can understand what you're saying? Or to go to a public meeting and make sure that the people who are running it know that because of a hearing difficulty, it would be helpful if I could see things visually as well as what's being said, or if I could be closer to the speaker, that sort of thing. To sometimes request closed captioning in slide presentations, or perhaps something in writing submitted before the meeting begins. It is to call attention to people that they have an obligation to accommodate my needs so that I can fit in rather than be a misfit.
Fantastic, Glenn. Thank you so much for that. So we'll have one more, and I see Finn, you have your hand up.
For me, disability justice means dismantling the systemic structures that are in place that make the world inaccessible for many folks. Whether that is having interpreters in place like we have today, or having in my office the only lighting option is overhead fluorescent lights, which as a chronic migraine haver and someone with sensory issues, I am currently looking for a lamp to keep on my desk. It is having accessible buildings. It is all of these little systemic things that make the world so inaccessible for so many people. And breaking down those systemic barriers, including financial barriers.
Including financial barriers. Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you, Finn.
Me, basic income is part of disability justice.
Yeah. No, and that is precisely, I think the financial barrier is something that we don't relate to disability or don't see it as a disability axis, but it is precisely one of the biggest barriers, right?
I can only work part-time due to my disabilities, and well, let's just say there's more on my credit card than there is in my bank account.
Sorry to hear that. That's a reality for a lot of people, and thank you for trusting us and sharing your stories. And thank you, Glenn, also for sharing how you encounter things. So I'm going to do a little exercise here. And for those of you who may have low vision, I'm going to show, as an academic, disability justice principles. And this is what I'm going to show you. What is that? For some people who may have difficulty absorbing visual information, that's not very friendly. People who cannot discern colors, I mean, the art is beautiful. The types of letters, the little bubbles in the background. But if you have issues with vision, or if you have dyslexia, or if you really cannot, there's too much sensory stimulation by colors and letters of all shapes and sizes, you're not going to learn anything from that particular slide, right? So we need to not only do the work, but do the work in a way that is more accessible. And in this website where I have retrieved this information, they actually have the art, which is appealing to some people, maybe in the autism spectrum. They have the more line by line in still a PDF that is an artsy with colors. And if you go further in their website, you will find you click and there's a Word document with only words, which is fabulous for people who are blind and use a screen reader so they can go line by line. They don't need colors, they don't need format, right? So these 10 principles of disability justice were convened, set up by a collective of artists who are queer and racialized, and they are from the United States. It's called the Since Invalid Collective. And as you can see, some of these principles speak of anti-capitalist politics, the cross-movement organizing, sustainability, interdependence, and the last one is collective liberation. A lot of these words you may have heard in the social justice movement that you're involved. The way that we try to do the movement at Disability Without Poverty, we use the first principle, which is intersectionality. So not all of us look like me. Not all of us have the same gender identities that I do. Not all of us speak English. Some of us use ASL. Some of us use French. The second principle is really the one that we have fostered, and is leadership of the most impacted. So those who are leading Disability Without Poverty, all of us, the persons on the board, the staff, the volunteers, the organizers, they all self-identified as a person living with disability. And many of us, people who either currently have or in the past have had experience of poverty due to disability. So this is what we mean by leadership of the most impacted. We've been there. We know what it's like, so we're closest to the solutions. We also do what is called cross-disability solidarity. So if my issue is mobility, I used to be in a wheelchair for 5 years, so I'm only going to look for people with mobility. Or if I'm blind, I'm only going to fight for issues that impair me as a blind person. That would be very capitalist model of production, silo, silo, silo. We want to organize in solidarity, but not only at the horizontal cross-disability movement, but also cross-movement organizing. So if somebody's fighting for the environment, like the Grassy Narrows First Nations, they're fighting for clean water for their First Nations. And what happens if the water is not clean? That mercury is going to poison the people, is going to cause disability for generations. So I am going to join Grassy Narrows, and I'm going to go to the marches, and I'm going to write the letters for their liberation, for their clean drinking water, for water without mercury. Because in the end, it's all related to oppression and disability. And the same thing, Finn mentioned it, the anti-poverty movement that crosses many frontiers. Housing. I'm not only going to ask for affordable housing, but also accessible, affordable housing, right? So we need to be aware that there's many places that as disabled people organizers, we can actually support. And maybe I don't have the energy to go to every march, but I can click in that email that says, email your MPP for clean drinking water for First Nations peoples. Maybe I can send a postcard. Maybe I can just share that webinar about organizing an event. So there's some things that you can do. Everyone has a role. So this is the last poll, and it talks about ableism. Same thing. Who has heard about it? Maybe you have an idea of what it is. Maybe you know exactly what it is. Or maybe this is the first time you hear the word, which is great. You're learning something. Okay, there's the last poll. I hope you can folks see it and respond. That would be lovely.
People are coming in, Janet. We've got 9, 10, 11, 13, 12. We're up to 15 now. 16.
Excellent.
Seven.
Okay, that's a good moment to stop.
Okay. So let me just see how many we have here. Right. So 11% have heard of it. 33% have an idea of what it is. 44% know exactly what it is, and 11% say it's the first time they've heard this word.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So if this is the first time you've heard the word, would you be kind enough to share and say what do you feel when you hear this word? What kind of thoughts this evokes in your mind? Mm-hmm. Or if you have heard of it, maybe you can tell us which is the context that you have heard this word in. Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I feel like I struggle with that word because I used to be pretty athletic in the past, and then I got disabilities, so I feel like I'm in the middle. You know, like yeah, it's for me personally, I feel like it's something that I struggle with a little bit as a concept.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being vulnerable. So there's the academic concepts of ableism, and just like we have all the other isms, systems of oppression that have been made up out of thin air. They have been socially constructed, which is a fancy word for made up, right? And when they create this concept of who is a racialized person or who is a disabled person, they not only put the label, they also assign a value. They say, because you are racialized, this is your position in life. We can enslave your body. Because you're disabled and your mind is not working, we can put you in an institution. Or because your body is not working well, we'll give you work, but only part-time. Or we won't pay you as much as a non-disabled body. They use these concepts of isms to ascribe less value and to create more barriers, actually, on the work that we can do, the level of participation we can have. And yes, there are certain organizations that kind of want to rescue us, and they have the Special Olympics and the Paralympics. And this is a group where people with disabilities can shine, but only there, not in the regular Olympics. No, no, no. That's for non-disabled people. You don't belong there. So there's this otherizing of those of us who, when our minds or our bodies, our ways of moving or our ways of communicating do not conform with the norm, right? We don't have to believe that. We know what we know. We know who we are. And there's a lot of us. In fact, the last Canada Disability Survey say that there's 27% of people of working age in Canada who self-identify with at least one disability. 27%. That's 1 in 4. So we're not a small group. What happens is that the ableism happens when there's barriers. And all of us have faced barriers. So what does a barrier look like? Most of us think of that person in a wheelchair in front of a set of stairs. Yeah, that's true. But the biggest barrier for people with disabilities, and there's been studies and surveys done here in the UK, in Australia, everywhere, The first and biggest barrier is attitudinal barrier. It's even identified in the legislation. We have legislation in Ontario, and the whole Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act boils down to three things: identify, eliminate, and prevent barriers. That's the law. And it was passed 20 years ago. And we're still not fully accessible because these barriers are so entrenched in the structure of the society. These are structural barriers, such as the physical environment when we go to school, the hospital, a church. Everybody goes to church, and after church, everybody goes downstairs to have a coffee. Well, if you're in a wheelchair, tough luck. You don't belong, you don't participate. We also have the time or length of the activity. Everybody has a 1 hour meeting, 1 hour workshop. You need to cram everything in 1 hour because time is running out. That can be a barrier for many people who need 2 or 3 breaks to clear their mind or stretch their bodies or use the washroom, right? So we need to be mindful. How are we setting up the time we have? The hour of the day, or even the day of the week. If a person with a disability that has limited energy and luckily has a job, can we tuck in an hour workshop at the end of the day when they come home and they are exhausted? Maybe that's not the best way or the best time for organizing for your social movement. Transportation. Are you providing not only the tokens, so it's not a cost for them, but also is there accessible transportation in the area where you're at, right? So it is absolutely important. And beyond, maybe beyond of some of our capacities, if you're in a position of setting up, hiring staff, training staff, setting policies and procedures, are you setting up these policies in a way that are a barrier for others, right? And even though it's featured last, costs and finances are also a big barrier for everything we do. Here, for example, today we have 2 ASL interpreters, and that it costs money. All of us are connected to the internet, and if we have enough money to pay for the internet connection, that's an accessibility piece for us. But if you don't have money for the internet, you may join through your phone. If you don't have data, you're out of luck. So all of those financial costs are real. But we also have barriers that we don't usually think of. Environmental barriers. There's people who really go to a place that have a lot of plastics and it's toxic for their breathing or their skin. Their environmental sensitivities. They have food allergies. So when you arrange your social justice day and you're going to offer some food, don't just offer sandwiches. Maybe somebody has a gluten-free restriction and they may end up in the hospital. And also consider their faith. Is this food accessible to everyone's faith's restrictions? Communications. I showed you before, not just the format, but also the content. Like, do you really need to fill the page with 35 lines? Or can you make it in a way that is easy for some of us who have had maybe traumatic brain injury that can only catch, words or short phrases? How are we making this environment? And also, what is the medium? Is this action better done in a garden? Is this action better done in a movie theater? Is this better done by doing art? What is the medium? And is that accessible, right? This is usually what we think of a barrier for transportation. This is a picture I took 2 weeks ago from TTC station. So when we integrate the principles of disability justice, DJ is for disability justice, to eliminate disability poverty, we notice who is missing from your movement. Because if everybody in your movement can walk and run, okay, where are the people who use walkers? Where are the people who use wheelchairs? Where are the people who walk slowly, right? Ask people with lived experience, how can we integrate you into our movement? They are the experts. Be mindful of what barriers to inclusion you may have or your movement has. Everybody wants to go to Toronto for the protest. Yes, but can everybody pay for the bus ticket? Or are you are going to organize accessible buses so then everybody can go? Your cause is not the only one. So you need to support other causes that may have less privilege, less opportunities to raise funds. So maybe you can work in solidarity with labor unions. And if they are in solidarity with you, then you can participate. Recognize that everybody has a role. Even a person that does not speak, that does not move, that only sits there, they have a role. They have the power of representation. They can say this movement is for people like me. Even if I cannot move, speak, and I have a very limited capacity, I'm still representing my group. So always think, who are you leaving behind? And who picks up after you? Who's doing the cleaning and the garbage collecting? Your advocacy for this specific issue or disability experience is good, but committing to cross-disability solidarity lifts everyone. Again, remember, you don't have to do everything. You can use your gifts without depleting your soul, your source. You can lean on your community. So if you only have energy early in the morning, so maybe you can volunteer to go and set up. And after that, goodbye. You do the rest. Or maybe you can just offer to be the person who sends the emails. No? Aim for the widest possible inclusion, and collective access means sharing learnings and resources. So if you stumble with a free resource for transportation or food, or somebody's doing something in the community, don't keep it quiet, share it. Other people may need free printing of something, right? It is important, especially for collective liberation. Dalila Lewis, who's a disability activist, says you don't need to be disabled to experience ableism. And we have about, I would say, 20 minutes. So let me finish the presentation because I really would like to have a little dialogue in breakout rooms. So I was in a conference lately, and this is about health research. And this is how they set up their exercise for inclusion. What are some specific accessibility considerations to take into account within your own organizations and populations? And everybody had to use sticky notes and a pen up in a board. So you can think of all the many different barriers that modality presents. Luckily, they had a lot of volunteers. So if somebody couldn't write it, somebody could help them. If somebody couldn't stand up and put the sticky on the wall, some volunteers could help them. And this is the importance of recognizing that even when you're furthering the cause of inclusion, there can be barriers. But it's important also to just think, ask. I have a friend who uses a wheelchair, so how is the venue where I'm going to do my event, do they have accessible washrooms? Is the venue close to accessible transportation, or they have to, walk 10 blocks to get there? Offer non-gluten, non-dairy options, include trigger warnings, especially if your movement has been one where people have lost health or life or have been, suffer trauma and violence. Make sure you set it up front. Don't just drop a bomb in the middle of doing your presentation, because for some people that can be re-triggering. And also have a space to decompress. I'm so glad to know that after this session, everybody's going to have a good lunch break so you can rest or listen to some music. And it's important to have those breaks. Use a set of principles for equity and non-harassment policy. Some people with good intentions, they may come and say, oh, well, you're disabled, but I'm gay. Oh, well, you're gay, but I am indigenous. And we start trying to do this oppression Olympics and try to get our cause heard, when in fact, we can all do this work in collaboration and share resources. Give Accessibility 101 to your trainings, to your volunteers. Give Accessibility 101 training to your volunteers. We do this at the Toronto Disability Pride March, because that day when 300-400 people show up, these are people who are considered having experience of disability, and we don't know them, but we have volunteers. So we tell them to volunteer. If somebody shows up and asks for help, don't ask them, well, you have 2 eyes, 2 legs, you're not disabled. Tell me what's your disability. It's none of your business. Just you're a volunteer for access. You're there to support them. If they ask you, can you please open the bottle of water? That's what you're there for. So you need to train the person to be tactful, because not every disability can be seen or perceived with your eyes. So if someone tells you, believe them, right? So largely, I wanted to share this picture. In the last Grassy Narrows March, River Run, that just happened on September 18th, this volunteer had set up a table specifically for access support. It was a hot day, so they had water. You cannot see it because it's covered there. But they also had umbrellas. They have hand sanitizers. And right in front of her, they have ponchos, because we did not know if it was going to rain. They also had earplugs in that. There's a little box there with its little oranges things, because some people who are in the spectrum of autism, sometimes a lot of noise is too much stimulus. So we offer them that option. And they had snacks that are gluten-free, and they have lotion. And it is important that people with disabilities are seen, even if you may not have precisely the gadget that they need, but they know that, okay, this group of people see me. Make a suggestion. You know what? Next time you may need, I don't know, bottle holder or something, and suggest so they can feel seen and participated. Okay.